Hey Leo, ever feel like someone vanished from your life, and it wasn't random at all? What if I told you they didn't walk away just because of conflict, but because God removed them, to protect something sacred in you that they could no longer distort? Welcome to Eternal Mindfulness, where this isn't just another horoscope, it's a mirror to your soul, a divine decoding of why this moment in your life feels so intense, so necessary. You were pulled here by something greater. Not an algorithm. Not coincidence. But alignment. Divine timing. You may not realize it yet, but something powerful is unfolding in your world, and you're not alone in it. So tell me, Leo, has your energy shifted lately? Has silence become louder than words? Have you felt the weight of someone's absence not as a wound, but as a weird kind of relief? If you're nodding right now, then this message is yours. And it's time to look at that ending not as a loss, but as divine intervention. Someone in your life didn't leave because you weren't enough. They left because the light in you made their shadow too visible. You were too honest. Too real. Too whole. And God saw what you didn't. Their presence would only delay your purpose. That's why this video found you. Because what you're going through right now isn't punishment, it's protection. And we're about to go deep into karmic release, intuitive guidance, spiritual resilience, and your Leo power rising again. If you've seen repeating angel numbers lately, 1111, 2222, or 707, they're not just pretty patterns. They're codes. Messages from the divine reminding you, you are not forgotten. You are chosen. You are rising. Let me take a moment to thank you from the bottom of my heart, for being here. Every like, every comment, every share, and every subscription breathes life into this space and helps grow our Eternal Mindfulness family. And believe me, dear Leo, you'll want to stay until the very end today. Because what the universe is revealing is breathtaking. No fluff. No fear. Just truth, the kind that sets your soul on fire and your path on solid ground. Now, take a deep breath with me. Place your hand over your heart. And say it, even if softly. I am not abandoned. I am divinely protected. Let's step into this sacred space together. Because in the next few minutes, you'll discover why their absence was the greatest gift you didn't know you were receiving. And why what's coming next is built just for you. Sometimes, what leaves us silently teaches us the loudest lessons. You may still be carrying the question in your heart, why did someone you once felt so close to quietly pull away? And though your mind may replay every interaction, trying to find the flaw in your words, the truth may be far simpler, and far more powerful. Not all endings come from conflict. Some are born from contrast. You, Leo, embody the presence of light, a radiance that is unapologetically real. When that light walks into the room, everything false begins to tremble. It's not your intensity that pushes people away, it's your truth. And when someone isn't ready to face the parts of themselves they've long denied, the only choice they feel they have is to run. This isn't about guilt. It's about gravity. Your soul's energy is shifting into a place where pretense cannot survive. It's not that you are intimidating. It's that your presence reveals. You hold up an invisible mirror, not because you mean to, but because that's what authenticity does. It reflects. It exposes. It calls people home to themselves, and not everyone is ready to answer. Just as the sun doesn't apologize for shining even when the moon cannot reflect it, you too must stop shrinking so others can stay comfortable in their illusions. The moon, in tarot, often represents mystery, illusion, and subconscious patterns, while the sun shines with clarity, illumination, and joy. When these two meet in the human experience, something hidden must always come to light. That light might be uncomfortable, but it is never unkind. What happened wasn't personal, even if it felt deeply so. Some souls are not yet strong enough to stand next to someone who lives with clarity. And while it may hurt, it is not a wound you have to carry. It's a purification. An energetic release. Like when a river clears after the mud settles, your space is being made sacred again. The absence of that person, while confusing, was an act of grace, a clearing to make room for someone who doesn't fear your fullness. In spaces of transformation, discomfort often precedes growth. Not just for you, but for those around you. When your energy elevates, it shifts the dynamics of every connection you hold. Some will rise with you. Others will quietly fall away. And the most compassionate act you can offer is to let them go without judgment. Without trying to convince them to stay. Just as the tree does not chase its fallen leaves, you too are not meant to hold on to what has naturally passed through its season. There is a teaching in stillness, that you do not need to force closure to heal. You do not need an apology to gain peace. When you stop chasing answers and start holding space for what simply is, you invite a deeper clarity. That is where true self-mastery begins. In the quiet acceptance that not everyone is meant to stay. Letting go, then, becomes not a rejection of what was, but a devotion to what is. You are not abandoning anyone by moving forward. You are honoring your own timeline, your own growth. That is the most courageous thing you can do. And in doing so, you free yourself from cycles of over-explaining, over-giving, and overstaying in places your spirit has already left. You are not here to dim your light. You are here to learn how to hold it with grace. And sometimes that means standing in the glow of who you truly are, even if it means others can't bear to look. It means no longer seeing their exit as your failure, but as a sign that your truth is working. That you've grown. That your vibration has changed. And it's okay. Let it be okay. You didn't lose them. You simply made space for someone who will no longer be afraid to stand in your light. There are moments in life that don't arrive with thunder, they arrive in quiet. Not all divine guidance feels like revelation. Sometimes, it feels like stillness, like a door quietly closing without drama, like someone disappearing from your life without warning. And yet, the air feels lighter. Your heart feels calmer, even if your mind doesn't yet understand why. This kind of peace isn't accidental, it's intentional. It's not the absence of chaos. It's the presence of alignment. When someone exits your life without explanation, it may not be rejection, it may be redirection. There is a quiet intelligence to the way life rearranges itself, especially when you've been praying for peace, for truth, for a deeper sense of wholeness. And often, the answer to that prayer comes not through arrival, but removal. The departure of a person who once felt significant might be the beginning of something sacred, a clearing for new energy to arrive that is more aligned, more nourishing, more stable. God doesn't always speak through signs we expect. Sometimes, the loudest message is a missing voice, a silence that heals, a goodbye that never needed to be said aloud. Think of this: if someone you once cared for vanishes and you're left without chaos, without confrontation, but with a strange sense of clarity or relief, could that be protection in disguise? When your body exhales deeper, when your space becomes quieter, when dreams feel more vivid and less turbulent, these are not random moments. These are responses. This is your energy settling into safety. The signs you've been asking for may not flash in neon, but they will whisper, through angel numbers, recurring symbols, quiet nudges in your gut. When you notice the same numbers, like 3, 33, or 44, appearing over and over, it's not coincidence. The number 3 reminds us that support is never far. It reflects balance, harmony, and the creative force that holds us through transition. The number 33 is the call to heal, not with force, but with softness. It's a symbol of spiritual mastery through compassion. And 44, that's your foundation. That's the reassurance that where you're standing, even in uncertainty, is sacred ground. The protection you're receiving is not designed to isolate you. It's designed to isolate what's no longer aligned with you. There's a quiet form of wisdom in choosing peace over explanation, in releasing what doesn't return, and trusting that what stays, or arrives next, will not require you to dim your intuition or abandon your boundaries. When the right energy comes, it won't feel like convincing. It will feel like arriving home. It's natural to grieve what once was. But it's powerful to recognize when peace enters not with celebration, but with gentle distance. That kind of divine shift happens when you've evolved to a point where what used to stir you no longer does. It's not detachment. It's clarity. It's the emotional maturity that allows you to witness change without resisting it. Imagine you're standing at the edge of a forest, unsure why the path behind you disappeared, but suddenly noticing how clear the path ahead has become. You may not hear a voice saying, "This is the way." But every cell in your body knows, this silence is a compass. This stillness is a bridge. This gentle turning of the page is not the end. It's the start of the chapter you've been asking for, just written in a language your soul already understands. And if, at any point in your journey, you felt like you were quietly rescued from a storm you didn't even see coming, write it down. Let it be a marker. Let it remind you that you don't always need proof to be protected. Sometimes, the evidence is the peace you feel when you stop trying to make things work that were never meant to. Not every truth needs a headline. Sometimes, it arrives as a whisper, a flicker in your chest, the subtle tightening of your shoulders, or a sudden unease in someone's presence that you can't quite explain. You may not have evidence. You may not have proof. But you know. And that knowing, Leo, is not paranoia. It's perception. It's intuition, your built-in compass, your inner sun. Leo is ruled by the sun, the source of light, vitality, and clarity. But what many overlook is that the brightest light doesn't just illuminate what's beautiful, it also reveals what's hidden. That's why your intuitive sense can feel so confronting at times. Because it's not always confirming something you want to be true. It's revealing what is. And that kind of truth, it doesn't ask for permission. There's a particular kind of strength in Leo that's often misunderstood. It's not just the roar, it's the quiet alertness beneath it. The way you walk into a space and immediately sense the energy. The way someone's smile may not match the frequency behind their words. The way your body reacts before your mind can rationalize it. This is the sacred intelligence of your intuition. It doesn't analyze, it observes. It doesn't argue, it nudges. And when you ignore it, it doesn't punish you, it waits. But each time you override it, the distance between who you are and what you allow grows wider. Intuition isn't always grand or mystical. It's ordinary. It's in the moment you hesitate before answering a message. It's in the way your stomach drops when someone's energy doesn't feel quite right. It's the recurring dream you brush off as random, yet it keeps returning, knocking gently. And when you begin to honor these sensations as valid, when you stop needing the world's permission to trust your own body's wisdom, that's when the map begins to unfold. In the same way the morning sun doesn't shout to prove its presence, your intuition doesn't compete to be heard. It simply is. And it's always been with you, since before the noise, before the expectations, before you were taught to second-guess your own inner guidance. Tuning back into that quiet clarity is less about discovering something new and more about remembering something ancient, a kind of internal alignment that doesn't waver in the presence of outside noise. In some teachings, clarity is not something to be found, it is something to be revealed, when the waters of the mind settle. Think of it like this: the lake does not need to chase its reflection, it simply needs stillness. And in that stillness, everything becomes visible. Your job isn't to force clarity, but to create enough space for it to show itself. One breath at a time. Practical ways to return to that space are surprisingly simple. Begin your morning with conscious breathing, not for performance, but for presence. Keep a journal not just of thoughts, but of feelings, the moments you felt something shift, the people who made you feel off-center, the choices that brought peace even when they made no sense on paper. Sit with a stone in your hand, sunstone, perhaps, to reconnect you with your soul or nature, and just observe. No judgment. No agenda. Just the quiet act of listening inward. Ask yourself this, gently: are you honoring the part of you that knows, or are you trying to silence it because its truth feels inconvenient? Are you shaping your choices based on what aligns with your values, or based on what keeps the peace externally? The path of wholeness is not built on the loudest answers, but the truest ones, and those often come when you learn to sit still long enough to hear what your heart has been saying all along. It often begins with a quiet realization: the weight you've been carrying isn't just exhaustion, it's misalignment. There comes a moment when enduring is no longer noble, and shrinking to fit becomes too painful to sustain. For Leo, whose soul is built for radiance, this moment isn't a breakdown, it's a breakthrough. And it marks the point where living small is no longer an option, because your spirit remembers what it was made for. You were never meant to navigate this life by asking for permission to exist fully. The energy of Leo is about presence, not performance. Yet somewhere along the way, you might have internalized the idea that being seen was something to earn, that visibility required validation. But the truth is, nothing about your worth is negotiable. It was never meant to be debated, weighed, or approved. It simply is. This part of the journey calls for a different kind of courage, the kind that doesn't roar but rises. It asks you to reorient your life not around what you can endure, but around what supports your full expansion. In practical terms, that means becoming fiercely intentional with how you treat yourself, physically, emotionally, mentally. You don't need more intensity. You need more harmony. That begins by honoring your nervous system, letting go of caffeine-driven productivity, choosing rest not as weakness but as restoration, and using your breath as a daily return to center. Try the 4-7-8 breath. Inhale for 4, hold for 7, exhale for 8, not to fix yourself, but to remind your body it's safe to be here. And from that safety, clarity begins to grow. You start seeing the difference between what energizes you and what depletes you. You begin to notice how much you've spent, not just financially, but emotionally, in spaces that never truly saw you. Financial healing, for Leo, often includes releasing the urge to prove worth through spending. Buying to impress. Giving to be accepted. These are forms of emotional debt, and they weigh more than dollars ever could. When you realign with your true sense of value, you begin investing differently. You don't throw your light at those who look away. You conserve it for what reciprocates. Professionally, it's time to assess whether you are building something that reflects your purpose or just maintaining something that keeps you invisible. Leo energy thrives where it's acknowledged, not praised in egoic ways, but recognized in soul-aligned ones. If your current environment dims your spark or demands that you play small to be tolerated, that's your signal. It's not your fault. But it is your responsibility to choose again. And in love, the shift is even deeper. No more bending to be chosen. No more softening truth for the sake of temporary peace. True partnership is not about convincing someone of your worth, it's about being seen as you are and loved because of it. If you find yourself working too hard for basic presence, step back. Not to punish them, but to reclaim yourself. There is a strength in Leo that the world often misreads. It's not about dominance. It's about dignity. The Strength card in Tarot depicts a figure not conquering through force, but through inner calm, compassion, and self-trust. That's the kind of power you're being asked to reclaim now. It's the quiet power of choosing peace over proving, truth over tolerating, and alignment over attachment. So the question becomes simple, but sacred. Are you living as someone who's still waiting to be chosen, or as someone who remembers they already were? When you stop enduring what no longer fits, you make room for what was always meant for you, and that's where real life begins. Sometimes, what feels like the end is actually life rearranging itself on your behalf. Not to punish, but to prepare. You might not have seen it coming, the silence, the shift, the way certain people slowly faded from view, or how certain goals no longer felt aligned. But what may have looked like loss from the outside could actually be the quiet opening of something new. You didn't fall behind. You were being positioned. And the discomfort you've been moving through isn't a detour, it's a doorway. Growth often starts invisibly, like the way soil works before a single sprout breaks through. Leo, you've been planted deep, beneath the weight of expectation, responsibility, even the residue of old wounds. And now, as one chapter truly comes to a close, a new one begins, not loudly, but steadily. This is the energy of transition, of karmic cycles closing not because you demanded it, but because your soul no longer requires the same lesson. The people who left, the roles that dissolved, they didn't disappear because you were lacking. They stepped away because your vibration was no longer a match for where they were willing to remain. That's not abandonment. That's alignment. When the energies of transformation become active, represented by the number 5 in numerology, you're invited to release control. To stop gripping the storyline you outgrew. This number is dynamic, bold, and full of potential. It reminds you that life isn't meant to be stagnant, and neither are you. The number 8 brings in the echo of abundance, not just financial, but energetic, emotional, and spiritual. It's the number of return, the figure of infinity reminding you that what you pour out will come back, often in multiplied and more meaningful ways. And when you reach 10, the cycle completes, not as an end, but as a sacred reset. In tarot, cards like Judgment, Death, and the Ace of Pentacles reflect this moment powerfully. Judgment asks you to step into truth, to rise above the noise of doubt and finally own your calling without apology. Death, often misunderstood, is not destruction, but clearing. It is the ultimate compost of experience, where what no longer serves is returned to the earth so something truer can rise. An Ace of Pentacles is the fresh beginning that follows, a seed of stability, purpose, and yes, prosperity, planted in ground that's finally ready to hold it. Letting go of struggle doesn't mean you forget what you've endured. It means you no longer build from it. And that's what this chapter is asking of you, to move forward not with fear of what might collapse again, but with faith that what's rising now has deeper roots. You've already proven your resilience. Now you're being asked to practice receiving. Not out of entitlement, but from readiness. To stop measuring your progress by how much you've carried and start allowing support to meet you, softly, without resistance. Even the earth knows when it's time to exhale. So should you. Take this moment as a signal that what's been pressing on you is lifting. That you don't have to keep reliving what hurt you just to prove you're stronger now. You are stronger. You survived the silence, the leaving, the long nights of wondering when the next chapter would begin. Well, this is it. And the page is turning not because you forced it, but because you finally stopped clinging to the story that kept you small. There's a quiet courage in choosing to heal. And an even greater one in choosing joy after pain. So whatever comes next, know this, it isn't random. It's the return of all you've been building, the arrival of all that's been waiting. You don't need to go back. You're already moving forward. And what's ahead, love, purpose, prosperity, will feel less like a reward and more like remembering who you were always meant to become. You're no longer the one left questioning why they walked away. You are the one who now understands why they couldn't stay, and more importantly, why you are still here. There's a difference between surviving and stepping into your power. And right now, Leo, you are being asked to stop looking back at what dimmed your light and start walking forward as someone who finally remembers they were never meant to shrink. The truth is, you were never too much. You were simply surrounded by people who weren't ready to witness your fullness. But you are not here to prove anything anymore. You are here to live as the proof. And what you've been through. The silence, the exits, the storms, it all became part of your awakening, not your undoing. You didn't break. You built. You learned. You outgrew what you once begged for. That is not a loss. That is transformation. Now is the moment to practice what your soul already knows. Light a candle if you'd like. Or simply take a deep breath. And write this down. I no longer ask for permission to shine. I am the light. Repeat it aloud if you feel ready. Whisper it if you're not. Either way, your voice is sacred. Try sitting quietly, even just for 2 minutes, and breathe with the rhythm of your own heartbeat. Let the words settle into your being like soft rain. I am protected. I am seen. I am chosen. Let that mantra be the thread that ties together every part of you that once felt scattered. Let it become your anchor when doubt whispers and your lantern when the path grows dim. And now, I ask you, gently, but with full sincerity. Where are you right now on this journey? Are you still standing at the edge, afraid to let go of what's already gone? Or are you finally stepping into the space that was always meant for you? Share it in the comments. Not just for me, but for you. For the future version of you who will look back and say, that was the moment I chose myself. Maybe you've been seeing signs, angel numbers like 111, 444, 808, subtle reminders that you are not alone, that the universe is walking with you. If so, leave that number below as a way of saying, I heard the message. I'm ready. If this message stirred something in you, if it helped you remember your strength, your worth, your truth, let it ripple outward. Like this video. Share it with someone who might need to hear it. Subscribe if you feel called to continue growing with this sacred community we're building together here at Eternal Mindfulness. And as we close this space today, I want you to remember this. God is opening a door no one else can shut. You are not standing on the outside looking in. You are the key. You've always been. And the life you were designed for? It's been waiting for you to finally say yes. So say it now, Leo, say yes to yourself. Not someday. Today.